All right. Good evening, guys. Haven't done a video in a while, but now I'm going to do this one quickly. Going to talk about the land conference in Namibia and why I feel like it might not work. It's coming up in October after being commissioned by our president, His Excellency President Hagi Geingob, who commissioned it as the third president of Namibia. There are a couple of things that I felt might lead to this land conference being a failure. One of those reasons it's firstly that we don't have a clear mandate as the Namibian people what it is that we want to do. You know, in South Africa, they're having their land conferences and talking about the South African land and what they want to do with it, how they're going to obtain it, and it's a unified voice. In Namibia, we only agree with one thing, and that is that it's actually two things. I believe it's two things. One is that the resettlement process hasn't been that good. The second one is that the land the redistribution of land is not fair, and also that the absentee owners of the farms, various farmland here in Namibia, who do not reside here in Namibia, we need to confiscate that or take that land away from them. But we don't have a clear-cut mandate exactly what it is we want to obtain from this land conference. Um, Expropriation of land has been thrown around there, has been thrown around in the talks that the various people have had. The various people they've had, the regional consultations they've had. But I'll give my reasons why I feel like the land process, the land conference will not really bear any fruit. Number one is a lack of a clear mandate of how we want to obtain the land. The problem is with the Namibian history. Namibia is a country which I say it is a salad bowl of different cultures and different tribes. Now, you have thus far, you have about 3 tribes in Namibia. Not actually three. We have about, I think, 7 or 10 tribes in Namibia. But out of the 10 or 20 tribes in our country, I'm sorry, the figures really lost. Out of the 10 or 20 tribes in our country, you have about 4 groups which are calling for land. These are namely the Ovaherero group, which was a victim of the first genocide that happened, the German Ovaherero genocide that happened in Namibia. Then you have the Namas. They are the ones also complaining for land. And then you have the San people. They have been added to calling for land. So already you have 3 or 4 groups that are calling to get, let me say, 50% of the land in Namibia, as they claim that that's their ancestral land. They are claiming ancestral land from down south of Namibia, going all the way up to the area of Grootfontein in Tsumeb. That's up north, up in the northern part of the country. Already we have this issue whereby these individuals, some of them, particular certain groups that have come out of this are groups known as the LMP, which is the Landless People's Movement, which has now officially become a political party. When it came into existence, you had its leader who had once was still a minister at that time, had complained to the fact that you have some people who do not have any ancestral roots to a certain region. For example, such as myself, I am from originally I was born here in Windhoek, but originally where my family roots lie, it's in the north east of the country. Because you were saying things such as a person such as myself, I cannot attain a farm in the northeast of this country. It would not be fair, it's not fair, and I should not obtain that. I should rather go and get a farm in the Zambezi region. There are some of the things that he was saying. There are some of the things that he was actually recorded on the various media, print and the television media, and the televisions where he has been openly said such things like that. So already we have these 2 groups, particularly the 2 main groups. The San are also there, but they really play they play a small role in this. The 2 groups, which is the Ovaherero and the Nama groups, those are the 2 big ones that are calling for ancestral land. The Ovahereros were one of the first tribes to actually rise up and fight the Germans to have actually start the fight for national resistance. They were led under the leadership of Samuel Maherero, which is in the history books. You guys can Google that on Google. They were led by him to fight national resistance against the Germans. But that's the one issue why I feel like this land conference will not work, is because Namibia having about 20 tribes, we all don't have a clear idea of how we want to, for example, get this land back? How are we going to get it? What are we going to do? The problem is, as much as you have a situation of where we all as Namibians want to contribute to the land conference and say, look, myself as a person in the Zambezi region want to say that all land in Namibia should be open to every person who is a Namibian and who has a Namibian identification card. I think that's what our constitution says right now, that the land, that every person, as long as you're a Namibian and hold, as long as you're Namibian by birth or by descent, you are allowed to own land, may it be agricultural, may it be urban land in any part of the country. Now, there are, from these two groups that were victims of the genocide, they are against this. They do not want this. They are literally saying, the one group is literally saying that, look, land in the area of the southern part of Namibia, which is now the area of Marintal, Keetmanshoop, that area, that area, the southern part of the country belongs to the Nama people. So a person who comes from the north should not receive a farm or should not be able to own a farm in that area. It is not fair. We have our people who do not have farms in that area. You have some people also in the Ovahero tribe also saying that, look, we should also not have people from other regions receiving resettlement farms or owning land in the northeast of the country, while you have the original inhabitants of this region, of this particular region, not having any land or not having any piece of property or land, while people from outside are busy being able to obtain land in these areas. That is one reason. Another reason is the fact that we're not debating this from a historical point of view. I remember in 2016, I was debating on Facebook with one member from the Landless People Movement, LMP group on Facebook. We're debating about the land issue. And he was mentioning that that their group, them, the Landless People Movement, want to get the land back and the government is being unfair, and the government's being tribalist towards them. The one part that I argued with them is that if you're going to debate Namibian history and how the Namibian history is set up, particularly African history, it's recorded history. It's put in books and it's put in so much material that we can read and revise and re-educate ourselves. The one thing that I was telling him was that the historical books, when the first Germans arrived here, they landed in a place called Angra Briquena, which is today modern-day Luderitz. You see, which is modern-day Luderitz. The Luderitz area, which is named after actually a German officer, one of our colonizers, Luderitz is named after a German colonizer. You can actually check him up on Google. The chief in that area, the indigenous chief in that area, actually signed over the rights of that land they sold, from what the history books tell us, is that they sold some weapons. They sold him some material things, some weapons, some weapons, some alcohol, some trading goods. They traded with him for that piece of land, and he had signed over the area of Luderitz. That is how the Germans got their expansion into Namibia, through Luderitz. From Luderitz, they started expanding inwards. By expanding inwards, the Germans passed a bill of divide and rule, divide and conquer, which was get the tribes of the area, in this particular instance Namibia, which was the Ovaherero, the Nama, the Damara, the San, the Ovambo people, the Caprivians, and the people from the Zambezi region, the people from Kavango also, get them to be divided and let them fight each other, and we rule them all. They passed those bills and they obtained land. Now, as they expanded inwards into Namibia, into the central part of Namibia, modern-day Windhoek, they were signing protection treaties with these various indigenous chiefs. And these indigenous chiefs were signing, even though one can argue that maybe these chiefs didn't know what they were signing or didn't understand exactly what they were signing over. They were signing these protection treaties, whether they were putting a proper signature or they were just making an X on this paper. They signed it. That's what history books tell us. These people were signing over land. And that is what some of the white population who live in our country, particularly white population, when I say white, I don't want to say the Germans or the Afrikaners, but most white population say that, look, these people were signing over land. We didn't kill anybody for land. There was land that these Germans obtained peacefully by signing protection treaties with these people. By actually, you can say they were tricking the indigenous people to sign protection treaties, which they were doing. But we can't deny that it's recorded history. And there was land that was obtained violently. There were the violent clashes when the Ovahereros decided to rise up and start fighting because forgive me, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, but because of the indigenous chiefs signing protection treaties, believing that no, the German troops would keep the people of the tribe of the Ovahero safe from the tribe of the Nama people, because they were in constant conflict for cattle and grazing area and all these things, and cattle raids were always happening. So now they signed these treaties with the they signed these treaties with the Germans, believing that it would actually protect them and keep them safe. But unfortunately, it didn't do that. Little did they know that they were signing away their land, their properties. They were signing away land and property, which maybe at the time they couldn't comprehend. They rose up and had the first battle of national resistance. If I remember the date, it was 1406. I might have to reference that, I'm not sure, but I'm just saying take that with a pinch of salt. I think 1406 they had the first rise up of national resistance, where Chief Samuel Mahero of the Herero tribe, who was the paramount chief at that time, wrote letters to the Nama chief of Captain Hendrik Witbooi, letters to the chiefs in the north to join him in the fight against the German people, as the German people were starting now to occupy their land and cutting their land smaller, cutting the portions of the land the indigenous African people of the Herero tribe occupied were being cut smaller and smaller and smaller by the German forces. Um, Fortunately, when he wrote that letter, some chiefs reacted late to that. The Overheros were forced to rise up on their own. They fought the Germans. Um, they were defeated. They were defeated. And first, they actually had a couple of good wins. I won't deny that part. They had a couple of good wins. They had a couple of very productive wins. They had beaten some Germans. They had confiscated some farms. They had confiscated some cattle. They had good wins. That's when the German government, under the Kaiser of that time, Kaiser Wilhelm, sent the letter for a very good German military general by the name of Lothar von Trotha, who was up in the Tanzanian area, who was an expert in fighting indigenous people of the African indigenous people. They say he was an expert military captain, a military leader when it came to fighting in Africa. So they brought him here to Namibia to come crack the Overhero uprising, which he did, literally did. But then he passed a law saying that now he was going to pass a law of any Overhero person seen on site, shoot to kill, whether it be man, woman, or child, shoot to kill. And that was the he passed, and that is one of the reasons why today the Overhero tribe in Namibia commemorate the genocide, and also are now calling for reparations from the German government because of what happened. That was one of the first genocides that ever happened. It happened here in Namibia. It was not the Jew genocide, which was committed by the Nazi government, but this was committed by the German government under the kingship of King Wilhelm. It started off here. They killed countless of Overhero people. They captured countless of Overhero men and women. They executed Overhero men and women. Most of those people had to flee from Namibia through the Kalahari to Botswana. Some fleed to Botswana, some fleed to South Africa, some fleed. They dispersed around. Some were captured and taken to some of the German colonies and prisons in Tanzania. And then later on, after the heroes had rose up and fought the Germans, the Nama people rose up with a chief of under the leadership of Captain Hendrik Witbooi, who rose up and who is a national hero today. He's the, if you ever travel to Namibia, he's the face behind most Namibian money, the Namibian bank notes. He rose up and he fought the Germans on two occasions. The first occasion he lost, he was beaten, and then he was forced to sign a treaty and retreat into the area known today as Gibeon. The area of Gibeon, that's where he moved to. The second uprising which he did, he rose up again with his Nama commandos to fight the Germans, and this time he was defeated and was killed in that fight. Till today, we still do not know where Captain Hendrik Witbooi was buried. We still do not know where his body was buried. They haven't yet discovered where his gravesite is, because if it is discovered, it will become a national monument, because this was his magnitude. His magnitude in this country is almost similar to George Washington's magnitude in America. So that was the two fights, and they lost. And then later on, you also had the chief in the north, Chief Nahale, who also rose up. This now I'm regurgitating the history that I learned in school. Chief Nahale also rose up and fought the Germans and defeated them in the area of today where modern Nomtoni is, the game reserve of Halali, that area of Nomtoni where the fort is, where the German fort is. He defeated them and he captured those people, but eventually he was also defeated. So that's the historical view that we would all have to sit down and look at. And look at how we'll debate at this land conference and what will be the way forward. I'm not saying that all white people obtained land through the blood of indigenous people. Some white people obtained land through them being settled there by their government. That is that one cannot deny. Even though maybe if they were not directly involved in the fights, but they were benefiting from wealth that was obtained through blood. So that's one thing one can argue. Well, I'm not trying to say that all white people are criminals, but this is the case. This is what happened. This is what happened in Namibia. This is what happened in Africa. It's African history. It's what happened in South Africa. The fact is, yes, some of them obtained land legally. They bought the farms from their government. But these properties they were obtaining, these farms and these pieces of land they were getting, were land that their government had obtained through blood and tears and actually mass killings of indigenous people. It happened. It happened. And then that's the second reason. I mean, there was the second reason I gave. The third reason again is because we don't know how to redistribute the land in this country. We already had a policy of willing buyer, willing seller policy in Namibia, whereby we had, if there is a farmer who's willing to sell his farm, he would sell it to the government would buy it, and then the government would put it up for resettlement. The resettlement policy was a policy which was drawn up to help redress the land issues, meaning that Namibians were encouraged to apply for resettlement farms, whatever region it is, whatever regional portion you are from, as long as you are Namibian by birth and descent and hold a Namibian identification card. You are allowed to apply for these resettlement farms. What has happened with the resettlement farm and the resettlement policy is that it has become rigged in terms of now people are applying for resettlement farms, but there's always that group of people that end up winning these resettlement farms. And it is not being exposed what exactly did this person, how did he write his application form, what did he do that the other people didn't do, or that he was successful, what was the criteria that he met. So these people obtain resettlement farms. The problem also with some resettlement farms is that you've had people who have obtained resettlement farms, but because, as some farmers in South Africa have said it, people cannot eat the land. They can't eat the land. As long as this person obtained this farm and is struggling to make ends meet, he will sell the farm. But in this case, you can't sell the farm because it's a 90-year lease. It's a 90-year lease in which you lease it from the government. So now what some of these guys do when they obtain the resettlement farm, they go to the Ministry of Lands and Resettlement, they sign off. And right after signing off the farm, 2-3 days, the same farm that was just obtained after 2-3 days will be put up on various farming groups on Facebook, advertised, and people will be welcome to come and rent. Because on the end of the day, I get a resettlement farm, but I don't have the means to farm. I got a farm, but I don't have the means to farm. I don't have the finances. Farming is an expensive activity. It's not cheap. It requires capital injection. It requires a good injection of money into it. So now with the resettlement farm story that has been going on in Namibia, and how people have complained, how certain powerful individuals in this country, politicians, businessmen, WISO politicians, regional political leaders, leaders in business have been obtaining these farms, while these resettlement farms were meant to assist the poor of the poor. But then again, with our current Minister of Land, who came out and was recorded on Checkpoint, South African Checkpoint, where he had said that farms are not for the poor people. I think people mistakenly took what he had said on that, what he was trying to put out there for people to understand. What he was trying to say is that we can't take a 5,000 hectare farm and put a person who doesn't have any income, because how do we expect that person to make ends meet? Farming is a very expensive activity that requires you to have a substantial amount of capital invested into it. So that's one of the problems with the resettlement farms. The other problem is that, as I mentioned earlier, people would obtain these farms, and within 5 months, you will come to that resettlement farm and you come look at it, and it's not the people that applied for the resettlement farm, it is somebody else. He ends up renting it out to people, he leases it out to people so he can get paid, because on the end of the day, come on, people cannot eat the land. People will not be able to eat, or people cannot make, people cannot take land and eat that. They need money. They need money to buy food and to eat. So that's what some of these guys do. Some of them obtain resettlement farms. They are not really utilizing them. There are some resettlement farms in Namibia whose fences are lying down on one side, are literally run down, are literally destroyed. Um, the equipment on that farm has been destroyed, and I also believe it's also the lack from the Ministry of Lands and Resettlement, of doing follow-ups on these farms. I don't think they do enough follow-ups on these farms. If they would have done this, I think this problem would have not been an issue in this country. The other reason why I also still feel like the resettlement, the land conference might fail, reason number 4, is because of an element of tribalism that is happening right now. Um, the messages and the conversations that are being had by various Namibians aren't actually one that is productive about let's build this country. It is more about, we want our land back. We are tired of this. We're tired of this government that is keeping us oppressed, that has been oppressing us for so long. We have not benefited from this land. And people in the north and the northeast of the country are the ones who are really benefiting from independence and are enjoying independence. There was one thing that I also wanted to touch on here. I think I'd give reason number 5 is this: the removal of the red line. The majority of the Namibian population, the biggest tribe in Namibia and the biggest group of people in Namibia, come from the north and the northeastern part of this country. The north alone, the Ou region, has one of the biggest populations. The current president mentioned before he traveled out, I forgot which country he traveled out, he had mentioned that he wanted to remove the red line, which is today known as the veterinary line. The veterinary line, the history of the veterinary line, the reason why it was set up was because of 2 interesting factors. The one factor was that the Germans were, because of the border disputes with the countries that had colonized Angola, which was Portugal, and the country that had colonized Rhodesia, northern Rhodesia, I believe, which was Zambia back in the day, were Britain and Portugal. So the Germans didn't want to get into conflict with the British because the British had a very good military, and the Portuguese also had a very good military. The second reason why they also didn't want to ride up north to go colonize the people in the north, particularly in Ovambo region, was because the Ovambo people were a large and very strong tribe. This was a tribe that was trading with the Portuguese and buying weapons and had guns and had kings and had armies who were a little bit better equipped than the other tribes that were able to grab. And because of the distance to the north of the country from Windhoek, also made it a hassle to travel. And then now you go to the Zambezi region, which is one of the furthest regions in the country. It's about a 12-hour drive from Windhoek to the Zambezi region, to Katima Mulilo. Because of the area was so far away, the Germans had to find another way of how they're going to be able to control the population up there. What they did was, they did 2 things. First, they first created a local government, which is almost like an administrative government for them, an administrative arm for them, which they put in those areas, the northern regions. The second one they did was they drew up the red line. The red line made it very difficult, or some of the reasons they pointed out was because of the render pest and whatnot. But the biggest reason we know the red line was drawn up was to separate the country into 2 parts, which was now the one part which was almost like a police zone, which was now south of the red line, which is now the regions of the Njupa region, Irongo region, Karas region, Omaheke, Khomas. This area is now south. The regions up in the north is Kunene, the Ou regions, the Ovambuland, Oshikongo, Shikuku, all those areas, the Ou region, in the Zambezi and the Kavango. Because these regions were so far to travel to, they dropped the red line. The red line is a mechanism that they used to oppress the people in the communal area, which meant now the lands in the communal area became unproductive. There were little or few economic opportunities in the northern parts of the country, which meant that able-bodied men and women had to leave the northern communal areas, leave the comforts of their villages, and travel to Windhoek to get jobs, to Windhoek or the other towns outside of the red line to get jobs. Modern day Namibia, this red line has now changed. They've tried to put a different color on it and say, no, it's a veterinary corridor. It's to protect the Namibian meat market. You have people up there in the communal area of the northern part, and this was statistics that were done that said there are about 1.3 million cattle in the northern communal areas. There's 1.2 million cattle this side of the red line. And the reality is that the farmers this side of the red line, the commercial and communal farmers this side, cannot keep up with the demand for meat. So now our president said we should look at removing the red line. Him saying that triggered a lot of backlash, not just from white farmers, but also from black farmers, which was quite shocking. The white farmers were giving reasons such as tuberculosis, illnesses, foot and mouth outbreak, how that will end up collapsing the meat market. The black guys were also reiterating the same thing. The quality of cattle in the north, they're not good quality cattle, there's diseases, there's all this type of things. It made me sit down and just show that Namibia was still highly segregated. I don't think there'll ever come a time, not now, maybe in the near future, maybe Vision 2030, where we as Namibians will be able to sit down and say and speak in one loud voice and say, we we want to take responsibility for our country. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it's not going to happen because we're segregated. With the removal of the red line, which farmers in the northern part of the country, in the northern communal areas, the NCA, are calling for, farmers this side, white and black farmers this side of the south of the veterinary line, are fighting it to remain. You have people in the northern communal areas who have close to, one guy can have a herd running off close to 150 or 200 heads of cattle alone. The reason why you'll have so much cattle is because there's no real market opportunity there. You can try and make money from slaughtering cattle and selling the meat. You can try and make money from selling cattle to people, but you will be getting peanuts compared to what these commercial farmers get this side. Some of us only keep the cattle because cattle is a very big currency in our communal area. You know, it's a means of ways in which we pay for a lot. We pay damages for if we made a kid out of wedlock. We pay for the bridal. We pay bridal price when we want to get married. Well, it's also used as a currency for trade and stuff. When you wanna, for example, your cattle escaped from their holding pens and grazed someone's mealie fields. You get charged. They charge you and you have to give one cow or so. So that's the reason why we have cattle. It's more for traditional means. This is why farmers in that area and this side, farmers this side, I just had a friend who called me. He bought about 4 Simbra bulls. He spent about 135,000 Namibian dollars. They can, these guys this side of southern of the veterinary line can afford to invest big sums of money into their cattle. While farmers up there, it doesn't really make sense because on the end of the day, who are you going to sell it to? If you're buying a bull for 32,000, how are you going to make the 32,000 back? So it does not really make sense. So now, as I was mentioning with the removal of the red line, already, as one would have expected, being a black person and being a person who comes from a oppressed background, they would have supported it and said, look, let's remove the red line. Yes, let's remove the red line so this communal land farmers there in the northern part of the country can farm there and live there productively because there is rampant unemployment and rampant poverty up there. But the commercial white and the commercial black farmers seem to be agreeing in one thing, and that is they do not want to remove the red line, and they want to continue excluding the communal land farmers who are up in the north to remain excluded from the larger meat market of this country. So those are my 5 reasons why I believe this land conference that we are about to embark into October might not really bear any fruit. Because number 1, we still don't have a very clear mandate. Number 2, we still have an element of tribalism. Number 3, we still don't really we still don't understand how we want to do our resettlement policy and how the land redistribution will happen. And number 5, the removal of the red line. I feel like as long as those things do not happen, the land conference will fail. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. Good night.